Welcome back to our Mega-lo-Mania rewrite in Unreal Engine. Last stream was on Friday, and since then I've done quite a lot of bits and pieces throughout the game yesterday. Spent quite a bit of time on it. Unfortunately weren't able to stream at all due to other time constraints, but in between all of the other things I did actually manage to do quite a bit. So most of it is still just chopping out the sprites, creating the menus, organizing the sprites, using the data, that kind of thing. So a lot of it is all just the same at the moment. Once I've got all the menu screens complete, then we'll actually start working on the logic of each of the individual menus. It's going to be a bit more interesting and certainly be more worthwhile streaming that. So I think all of the data that we had last time, some of it has been updated by small amounts just to correct issues with it, but all the data remains the same. So I'll just play it and we can see where the current state is. So I have filled out the shields and the speed on the right hand side. I have completed or filled out the main menu area. Again, this is just placeholder for the resource stuff, just to get the positions and the bits and pieces in the right place. Filled out a few of the arrows, and I think the biggest kind of improvement in terms of actual logic and stuff was fixing and getting the minimap to work correctly. So we can see that this is mapped to the right name and is showing the right map, and we can go into the level blueprint, change the island name. I always forget what the island names are. I'll actually pick one we haven't seen before, that one. Don't know if it's any good one, but it's a different one, and that'll help emphasize or demonstrate the map working. So play that, and as we can see that the map is correct in terms of its style and positioning and shape. Now a lot of that was down to the sprites. It took quite a bit of time to complete the map components data table, but it is now complete. I have I filled in the better sprites column, which I think I can now rename because I've got rid of the previous sprites column, which is a enumeration of the different biomes to their respective map component. One issue that I did have was when you add a new item to a map like this, it defaults the two values, but you can't add another one with a default value there, because obviously you can't have two nons in this case, which is our enum value. So that's why I've added an enum value of non into here, because before the default was desert. So once I defined my desert map on each of the different components, I wasn't able to add another one, which was a bit annoying. So I've added that non to kind of space them out. So something to be aware of when adding them into a map using this interface. Well, you kind of need that top level default value to be nothing so that you can change it. But yeah, so there's basically all of the map pieces applied that currently exist to all of the different textual representations, and it's now using that in combination with the current level to display the map. Now, I did suggest that the logic required to get the map to render correctly was going to be a bit awkward, and it was, but I did actually manage to figure it out fairly easily. So we'll just go through that. So this is, we'll start at the very beginning. This is what we set up before, where we're adding all of the images, all 16 images into an array, and saving them as an array on this blueprint, and then we're calling this render map function. And the render map function is, for all intents and purposes, what it was last time, with a couple of additional outputs in case of errors or in case of things not quite matching up correctly. But the render map loops over all the sectors that has been provided to this widget and finds the appropriate image, finds the appropriate map component. Finds the appropriate map component using the new identify sector type, which we'll look at in a moment, and then sets the image on that and the visibility on that. So the identify map component is a big one, which was effectively it's trying to figure out, based on where the current sector location is, what if any sectors are adjacent to it, using the 4 sides. So the logic flow is, given a location, and that location represents kind of a 0-based index of the minimap. So in this case, 0 is the top left, and then 1, and so on and so forth, all the way around, down, up to 15 is this last one. So given a location, we add to that 4, well, we take away 4, and that gives us the 1 above. We add 1 to the right, we add 4 to the bottom, and we take away 1 to the left. So that gives us all the 4 sides around our map. And we put them into an array. Now some of them aren't valid. Obviously, if you've got something on the top row or the bottom row, then the one above or below is not actually going to be a valid space, but that's handled a bit later on. So we store that array of things here, and we store it because we have to manipulate it. And this was the big part. There's so little code to it, but it's the most difficult one. If we just skip completely over that, instead of go here, we'll go over here, and we'll render the map again. In this case, it looks fine. There seems to be no difference. But if we pick a different map, back to our game level, I think it's just 1 L in that map. I always forget, but let's go with that. Nope. So get my map name correct. So this one again looks fine and correct. I have to find one that doesn't. One moment. I think the one I was working on yesterday. That one. And nope, that's almost the same as the previous one. It's one of the snow ones. Not that it's limited to the snow one, it's just the snow ones are the ones I was testing. There we go. So without that extra bit of code, what we end up with is a scenario where this sector piece thinks that it connects to this sector piece. Because they're in a 0-based array of pieces, they technically do. But because it wraps, they actually don't. So I got it into this state fairly easily, but fixing that kind of wrapping issue was quite difficult, even though the result isn't that complicated. So we'll tie that back up and prove that it works. Now we get our edges on each side. So the key thing here was that it takes the location passed in from over here down this route, and we do the modulus of 4, which will give us the remainder if we divide that location by 4. Now if the remainder is 3, that means that we're on the right hand side of the map. So we're the kind of the third piece over. Whether we're the third piece of the first row or the last row makes no difference. The modulus of 4 would give us 3 in either case. If that's true, we want to actually set an array element using this temporary array we've stored here. We set index 1, which one represents the piece to the right, and we set it to -1 rather than whatever it would be before. So if we're looking at just play it. If we're looking at this piece here, that would be location 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the next piece over would be 8. So we're setting array index 1, which represents effectively the next one to the right. We're setting that piece to a -1, so that it kind of ignores it later on. If the modulus is 0, which means we're on the left hand side, we basically do the same to the other side of the array, so we do it to this index instead. We set index 3 to -1. And that basically means that this array, for anything kind of in the middle, the array would be, so if we're talking about location, if we're talking about location 3, even here, 0, 1, 2, sorry, 2 here, then we know that -4 would be -2, then we'd have 1, -1, which would actually be, so that would be 1, 3, maybe if we do this, see if we can represent it better. So that's our 0, 1 second cleat piece. Therefore that would be number 1, that would be number 3, up here would be -2, and down here would be 6, more or less. So that's what this array would turn out with if we given that. And because none of those values when modulus to 4 actually results in 3 or if the location modulus to 4 doesn't result in 3 or 0, then nothing of this actually gets done. All of that is effectively skipped. And we know that it can only be either on the left or on the right, so only when we go through the false branch do we do the other side. So if, however, we're looking at this piece, we'll use this one so we're far away from that one, and we'll do it in yellow. Yellow might not show up quite well, we'll do it in blue. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's the 8th piece. It's not particularly great. That would be therefore 9. That would be 7. That'll be 4. And that'll be 12. So in this case, we've come in here and we've added all the pieces up using this. And then we've determined that if we modulus by 4, which 8 divides by 4 twice, the value is 0, because there's no remainder. So we do this if there's no remainder, so we don't do that bit, go down the false branch, but we do this bit. And we set index 3 to be -1. Index 3 is our +4. Sorry, no, our -1, get it right, which is this 7 here. So we actually set that 7 to -1 instead. So once we've done all that with the array, we've basically got an array of 4 elements. The value is either a positive number from 0 plus or a negative number. So we basically do a quick check of, is it in the range of 0 to 15? So all the ones that we've just either set through 0 because of this basic sum, or set through 0 through this changing, are just ignored from this point on. If they're not, if they are within that range, we come into here and we attempt to find the sector in our sectors array for that location. So we know that our sector structure has a location, and we find it. If we do find it, then that's good. We go into the true and we say, we start setting this local sector type value. If we don't find it, we keep looping until we've exhausted all of the sectors, and if we don't find it in any of them, then we don't do anything. Now this string that we're building up here is concatenated between various textual parts that map to our map components. So we've got top, right, bottom and left, and these top, right, bottom and left index values come from the for each array that we're using, or the for each that we're actually iterating over this array that we've made here, our adjacent locations. So given the index of the adjacent location, if we find a sector that maps to that, we append to this string one of those 4 values. So if we're looking at purely our number 2 space here, we only find a number 6 sector, a sector with a location of 6. And because of that, we only add bottom to the location sector type string. In this case, in case of 8, we find both a top and a right, and therefore the text reads top right. Once we've finished that loop of all those 4 pieces, so we're only checking 4 pieces here. Sorry, this loop's only iterating round 4 times, but this one iterates over every sector. But once we've done that, we handle the case where there's no connections. If the string is empty, then we call it an island, which is what we've done in our map components. We print it out just for debugging purposes, but then we return it. And what we print out is the location and the local sector type. So if we go into the game output log, we'll just clear it and restart, we can see down here that we've got location 2 is bottom. So if we bring it up again, we can see location 2 is connected to the bottom, location 4 is the bottom right, and so on and so forth. So this kind of helps validate all these pieces are correct, and basically outlines what they are. Now, once that's done within our map, once we return from that, we go back to the render map. So we get a string value out from here, and we try and get that string value from the map components data table. It returns a map type as a name, so that we don't convert it here all the time. We convert it just once here. Makes the use of it pretty clean. Obviously we have to convert it back to a string for any error cases, but that's not too much of a problem. So given a map row name, we then find it in the data table, and if we find it in the data table, we set the sprite component accordingly. Using our better sprites map, we just map that to a biome, find the appropriate biome in there, sorry, and then we've got a sprite, and then we set it on the image and the brush part of that. So that's all how the map renders. Not as difficult as I expected. The wrapping part was a bit of a complication, but the other thing that I've implemented is this selection of spaces, kind of. There's some awkwardness where sometimes it just doesn't seem to work. Like here, we can seem to select these 2 places, but we can't. Oh, now we can select everything. And I don't know why. There seems to be unreliability there. But currently that's working by this highlight sector function, and this highlight sector function is called by the on mouse button down, and the on mouse button down is actually tied to the entire widget itself. So basically on the top level canvas layer, rather than on each of the individual map pieces. And we say, if we've clicked the mouse button, we get our images array. We find which one we're hovered over, and if we are hovered over one, then we call this function with the index of which image we're looking at, and we call sector selected. Now we call an event here rather than our highlight selector function, because the map can be used in 2 contexts. It can be used within the game, as we are kind of creating here, but it also is used within the map selection here. and in this case we don't use the traditional square selector, so we need something else to say what we should do when a sector has been selected. So that's handled by the widget above, which in this case is our panel. So if we go to our game, content, UI, screens, not screens, panel, we can see in its event graph, it calls the create map widget, as we've seen before. It binds to this sector selected event, and it simply calls highlight selector, highlight sector, but it actually calls that again within that widget's context. So back on the widget, and then this function gets called. This function simply gets the image from the images array using that index, and then finds the appropriate slot in which that image in within the canvas, because that's how you can get the location of a particular widget. The image itself, for example, doesn't actually have a location, but the slot that the image is in has the location. So we get the location of that, and we actually get the selector image, and we simply get its slot and changes its slot position to that of the image itself, with a small adjustment to make sure it fits correctly, and then we make sure the selector is visible. So currently there's no call to set a sector selected by default, so it doesn't show up until we actually select somewhere. But as I say, I'm clicking multiple times and it just doesn't seem to work all the time straight away. But once it starts working, then it works. So I'm not sure where the problem is there. Whether I've just done it in a unreliable way, or whether there's some other product at play. So that's not great, but it works most of the time. So the next bit that I tried to fill in, or I'm working on, was the menus, and I've renamed the menus now to be screens. I wasn't very keen on the menu terminology anyway, but also within the root screen, where's it gone? I've added a, oh no, sorry, it's not in the root screen, is it? It's in the panel. So the panel is the person that controls everything, the whole right hand side, and what we can see here is our map container, which has the opponent's widget rendered, and the map widget is there, but since we don't know what map to render, it doesn't render anything. So there's a slight disadvantage there in the way that everything is connected up, in the fact that the level controls which map to show, not the map widget itself. But because the level doesn't really have that kind of in-editor pre-construction function, or at least so far as I could find, the level within the map is set, but it doesn't get passed to the widget. I don't know where that just came from. It's gone. Saved it and then randomly rendered something else on screen. So the map container doesn't work 100% from within the editor anymore, but it's not too much of a problem. We know that it's there, we know that it will render correctly, and we can test it within the game anyway. We are then using a screen switcher, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to call everything screens. Now the screen switcher allows you to put multiple widgets within it, but it will only ever display one, and it displays whichever's at the top by default, and you can select the individual widgets within it to see the various widgets, and basically you can tell it to switch between those by either saying show this one, show that one, that kind of thing. So I've tied up the existing menu change event within the screen switching. So our panel basically calls the switch screen function just to kind of preset things up, even though the menu would be displayed, or the root menu would be displayed by default anyway. It's worth calling this because then we get some extra behavior. So the screen switcher basically has a function called set active widget, and to that you give it the widget you want to be shown. Now assume it could be a new widget that you've just created, or it could be a existing widget that's got defined on the page. Don't suppose it matters. In our case, we're using one widget that's been pre-created and we're just switching between them. Whether that will work out better moving forwards, I don't know, because obviously that means that the widget has kind of more of a persistent lifetime. Maybe that will mean that we have to apply some cleanup or resets and stuff like that, which may be a bit awkward. But we've created this select and we pass into it all the widgets that we've created, the predefined ones. So at the moment we're allowing the root menu, the research screen, blueprint screen and the repair screen. The defense, combat and resources have yet to be done. And we're saying if the return value is not none, because these three are none, we just capture that none case and put an error on screen. If it's not, we just set the active widget and then we bind to the menu change event. And when the menu change event is fired, we literally just call this function again, because the menu change event gives us a type, this function takes a type, it all ties up in a nice little circle. So that gives us the ability to go in and out of those functions, those screens, without really a great deal of additional work. If we click on the defense, we get the text message on screen that I've mentioned. Now I have actually done the defense menu, so we're going to tie that up now. So the first thing that we're going to do is drop the defense menu into our panel. Again, because we're just going through the process of actually having them on screen, we're going to continue to do so unless it proves to be a problem. So we take the defense and we'll drop it down the bottom of our vertical box. Now the fact that it's a vertical box actually doesn't make any difference, because things shouldn't show up underneath each other, should they? Where did I put it? Yeah, I did put it in the vertical box. That's not true. That's why I got a bit confused. The vertical box is there because the root menu has the date, the sector's tech level and the sector name on it, whereas all the other menus don't. So it's worth, I've got that vertical box to handle that. So that vertical box is a widget. Now I've never actually verified that that works. Yeah, quite sure how that does it, but when I say to the, I didn't realize this before, but I've actually tied up the root menu into my select, only the menu as it happens, and I then call set active widget, but I don't put it into a container, which it currently is. So it, wrong one again. So it must actually be finding that widget within the hierarchy of the switcher and saying, okay, well that's parent is that, and therefore that's the widget I should show, not that one down there. But the fact that it works seamlessly is good for me, and the exact details are not too important. But we've added our defense screen, very basic, just has the icons in appropriate locations. And all we need to do is actually tie up the defense screen into this select, and we can now go into the defense screen. And because I've already tied up the exit of the defense screen, you can come straight back out of it. So I've done the repair screen. Again, this is just a placeholder. I've added all the icons for the shields. Obviously I haven't got all the images for the 3 and 4, so I've just reused them. Added the building icons and their strength or health. The blueprint one, again, we've kind of done that before, but it's there. And the only one that's, or there's still a couple that are left, but the combat one, the building one, and the resources one. Now the resources are a bit awkward or different, and to resolve that, I have created this resources widget. So resources widget, the research screen should be in there. Oh, we have two, that's annoying. The resources widget by default just looks like this. Now, most of these images are the arrows, which we are going to have to reference because they do disappear in various stages of the game. Then we've got some hidden widgets, which I'm not sure we're going to use them or not. So basically some of these images are the resources as well. And this widget actually goes above its screen line intentionally because that's where it joins up. So that makes it look correct when it's placed within the root screen. We can see that it actually extends out of the box to point correctly to the little man there. And the difference with the resources is they may be tasks. So I've actually put down a task item. If we just show it over the top. Now they may be tasks because you can assign and unassign people to these resources, but I'd rather not be kind of creating and switching widget types. And the resources that are gathered by hand are not tasks. You can't assign people to them. If I find the right image. It's selecting the task because it's there underneath them. Yeah, so you can't assign people to these resources that are gathered by hand. So I need a way for the task to know that if it's a certain type of resource that's gathered in a certain way, the user doesn't have any influence over assigning or unassigning people to it. So I think I'm going to have to customize the task specifically for resources. And that kind of makes some sense as well, because if we look at the actual resource mining screen, just find it, screenshots. So if we look at this one, we've got two at the top which are gathered by hand, and they could be gathered by hand for the lower epochs, but they would also be standard mining ones for the higher ones, and you can assign and unassign people. But the big difference is that this is almost a task, except for the fact that the right hand side is not a timer. It's just a resource count. So I don't know whether it's specialization of the timer one. I don't think that it is, because it's the same visually perhaps to the most part, but it's different in terms of actually what it does. So I think I'm going to create a new resource specific widget for them both. So let's play again. So the research screen, again, it's not functional still. We don't have any resources that you can search. Blueprint obviously only works when we've unlocked them. This won't really be functional unless we start getting some structures on the screen. This one, again, kind of relies on the structures. Combat relies on combat stuff happening. So the research one we know functionally works. All the bits and pieces are in place, whereas the resource gathering stuff isn't. So I'm going to try and work on that. So we have our task that we've created earlier. That's a full set of pieces, allowing a player to assign people to a given task with a timer. And the logic within this timer will, moving forwards, or even already does actually, doesn't it? Because it knows what's happening, it knows how long it's going to take. So all this kind of functions with what we've got. So trying to customize this to work with the resources screen would probably just make this a bit messy. So the easier approach, I think yes, this one's done slightly differently because it's all within a horizontal box. It's a level of elegance which might say that's slightly nicer. If we add it to a canvas panel, the horizontal box just takes up the space that it needs to. And we know what the X size of all of our widgets are. So if we go over to looking at one of the screens, from the root screen, they're all 84 pixels wide. So we can go back to the task and just say that X should be 84. So I don't think that's going to make any difference. I mean, unfortunately we don't show the task anywhere at this point, but it's just slightly nicer for it not to be full screen and right in the middle of the screen as well. So we're going to customize the task. We're not going to customize it by inheriting from it, because that, again, it doesn't make any sense. There's not enough logic that's shared. So we should be able to duplicate it. So the task is the one with the timer. So now we've got two tasks. We want to change this one to a resource task. And it should have duplicated all of the code as well. So for the resource task, we need to display a resource. So we just pick any one of them. We use the sun because that's what we've got within our screenshot. Close that. I'll close my screenshots too. So I don't think I've got the broken stone, so we'll just quickly grab that sprite. There it is. Finding it's sometimes a bit of a challenge. So this one represents, so we've got, bring the screenshot back in again, we've got three types. We've got ones that are gathered. When they're gathered, they literally show their icon on the right hand side. So that would be rock, slate and wood would work in that way. If they're mined any other way, where obviously manpower is required, then the icon represents how. So in this case they're mined with the open pit, and in this case they're mined with the deep mine building. So this one we'll call just call it open pit resource. I don't know if it should be left or right aligned, but we'll stick with that. So we've got the open pit resource, and then there's the effective gold, blue and gold bars somewhere in here. There, so we've already got them, and that will be the deep mine resource. Oops. I can't see what I'm typing. Deep mine resource. I do have the icons for the shield top hat, I just didn't rename them. Never mind. So now we've got our extra icons, we can jump back in here and do that. Now it's never going to be infinity, so we can just get rid of that. We need to align that back to the top. To the top. Is that the same as this one over here? So it's in a vertical box because we've got text. We might have to put them both. It might be better if both the resource image and the what's still currently named the timer was aligned in the same way, because they look a bit off. I do hesitate to put padding and stuff on things, because it's just an arbitrary number somewhere that's always difficult to deal with later. Okay, so TechMan is the same. Allocated population, that's fine. The task image, that's kind of a fine name too. It could be resource image, but it doesn't matter. However, the timer image is incorrect. That's the don't really know what to call it, because it's in the case of the gathering, it's the resource. In the case of the pit or the deep mine, it's just an icon. We'll call it the count icon, because it's the icon above how many of that stuff you have, and that should be that. Yep. So within our graph somewhere, there's the infinity image. So the infinity image is not here, so we can take both of those away. And we don't want to set the timer image frame either, so we'll literally just get rid of that completely. And there. So this was set the remaining time, so again we'll just get rid of that. It's not going to be useful to us. Set allocated population is useful, that's going to be the same in anywhere else. Setting the task, yes, it's going to have a name. And it's going to have an image passed into it, so that's all fine. Modifying the population is true for both of them. So the way our tasks tie up is it always is handled by the parent widget, and all these things are actually with the task outlined as we've created the three-part task. We need our kind of resource gathering menu. So within our resources, clicking this icon here, and this icon does change again depending on the tech level of your resource gathering method, be it hand gathering, deep pit, or deep mine. So this would be the I'll call it the method icon image, because it does change. So this resources is actually inheriting from the base screen, and it does that so that again it has that standard event given for changing the menu. So we know that when the user clicks on that icon, we want to go into the resource menu. So we call the menu change, which is actually again in our base screen, and the menu we want is the resources. And again, as always, we just handle that. Now that's going to trigger it on the resources, but nobody's going to be listening to the resources, because the resources are actually shown on the root screen over here. The panel listens to the widgets when the widget changes, as we've seen here, the binding to menu changed, but the root needs to propagate that menu changed event. So within its event graph, it sets up the research task, but before it does that, we want it to bind to our resources widget. It's going to be doing a few more things when it starts up as well, so hence why a sequence makes the most sense. So we bind to the menu change. Not of it. bit. Okay. It's got the menu change. Is this just getting confused? Should be able to bind to that because it is one of those. Base screen object reference. It can actually call it. I'm a bit confused here why it won't let me. Hello Eva, thanks for stopping by. Okay, not sure why we can't bind. I mean, that's what it is already anyway, so. Yeah, I'm running the original game in DOS emulator, but I'm cloning it in Unreal Engine. I don't know any of the Pokemon games, but which one do you intend, or would you like to clone? Is that not like the current one? The big one that millions of people play? Yeah, a dragon game would be good. Everybody likes dragons. Obviously the issue with cloning games that are still popular is that you'll likely just get told to stop. Mega-lo-Mania came out in 1991. I'm sure somebody owns the copyright to it, but I'd be surprised if anybody gets particularly upset about me copying it. I'm cloning it for mainly just to learn Unreal Engine more than anything. It's just kind of a learning experience, and it's nice to learn within the bounds of some other kind of within the bounds of another game, rather than having to first come up with a game and then implement that, trying to clone a game means that I know kind of how it works. Yeah, this is Unreal Engine 4 as well. Hello, Tay. If I understand what you're asking correctly, I'm making, well, Mega-lo-Mania from a clone of from 1991 in Unreal Engine. So far progress, we have a lot of the kind of most of the original kind of root screen done within the game. Just working on the menus part and the player interaction. If it would let me bind these events. So when I first started this stream, this is the 16th episode. So, and each time I've streamed has been about an hour and a half. So I've spent quite a lot of time on this already. But when I first started, I didn't know Unreal very well. So I've kind of just been learning it as I go. That's meant obviously I've had to redo a few things. And it also means I get stuck when it says I can't do something which I should be able to do. I don't understand why it won't let me bind. Works. So I can bind to the event that I've created in the resources class itself, but I can't seem to bind to the actual event of this class. Maybe because something already is. And that shouldn't stop me. Really don't understand that. The resources is a child widget of this widget. It may just be getting confused because it's called the same thing, and it's thinking that I'm trying to bind to the root screens version of it. So maybe have to propagate it using a different name. I didn't intentionally create resources as a base screen. I don't necessarily think that that's correct. I don't know. I very much doubt I can change the base class without recreating the entire widget. Is what I'd want to do. No, I can't seem to change its type, but see, having it as a base screen doesn't help me if I can't bind to the event that it is. There's not a great deal on here, so I think I'll just recreate that widget from scratch. But not using the base widget class now. So we can copy all of that. pretty much put it back in the same place anyway. And all we did was bind up the click event to our exit button. Sorry, not the exit button, our resource button. So in this case we'll create that, and we'll again call it our change menu. Don't know if it's going to get confused again because we've called it the same, but at least we can rename it now. And that needs an input of our menu type, which we've actually called screen now. And we want to go to the resource screen. Sometimes it doesn't like changing events that have been used. Hopefully that, yep, error's gone. So now within our root screen, we want to replace our resources with resources 2. I'm going to pop that right over the top. So that's that. 54Y. 354, 54, and then the size 183. Size doesn't have to be exact, so I take that away. Okay, good. So now we can bind to the screen change. The other one is set cursor, which is a bit odd because it's an enum value in the event. What else have we got? Yep, so this one would work better. So that's basically us propagating that event. So we can get rid of the 2 there now. Align that. So that should take the change screen event from our resources widget and propagate it as a change menu event, which we will rename, I think. So we go to the blueprint of our base screen, and we'll just change that to change screen. So we go over here, we bind to the change screen event on resources, and we propagate that as a change screen on itself. So that should mean that we can now go into our resources screen. Now we haven't actually done the resource screen, so we get an error, but the error implies everything is working correctly. Now we need our resources screen. I think I did create the blueprint, yep. And I've put the gathering icon, and I've tied up the event. So all we need to do in our panel is tell our panel about it. So find the appropriate screen in here. 2 research screens. Drop it in our screen switcher. So now we've got our resource screen. And tie that up there. That should be all we need to get the resource one working. So now we can use our new resource task. We'll actually do a bit of cleanup we'll find out who's using this. Doesn't look like anybody is actually using it. Yeah, see, we can see in this reference view, we can see the research screen is used by these things, whereas this one, if we view references, it itself is not used, although it does use a whole bunch of stuff, so we should be safe to delete that. Yep, no problems, good. And then we want to delete resources 1, because that one wasn't working properly. Yes, it's referenced by the root folder directory, but that should be fine. Not the root directory, the root screen. Yep, no issues there. So I don't think the root screen actually really did reference it after we removed it. So that's gone. So we want to modify our resources screen. Called it the resource screen. And we want to use our new resource task. And there's going to be 3 of them in there. Sorry, 4 of them, because that's the maximum amount of resources you can get in one go. Seems to be an awkward space on the far right hand side. Sorry, far left. It's probably because of the way that we wanted this to align in other cases. So I think really we can probably get rid of those 2 spaces. Tell the horizontal box. That should be fine. I think they wanted it to be to align itself in the middle, but it's not giving me that option. But nonetheless, it fits better now. So the blue highlights where the resource task is. If we look at our screenshot, that's what we're kind of aiming for. Shouldn't be too bad. There needs to be some padding on the left, but pretty much where we need to be. Can shrink that down a bit. And add some padding like that. We don't have to add it to each individual bit then. Gets it where we want it. So obviously we're not going to have all 4 of them the same, but that's what we're going to tie up a bit later on. If we play that now, we should be able to go into our research and we can see all of the different research, all of the resources. We can see all the different resources that we're doing, or could do in the end. So we want this resource task to be able to do gathering, mining, and from the pit. So this icon represents that it's coming from the open pit. Other ones come from elsewhere. Now the useful thing is that our resources table that's going to be used here tells us which one it is. So we already have an understanding of where you get those resources from. So it says here all these various different things. So what we can do is, for our resource screen, so the resources screen needs to be in control of what those resource tasks show, because someone has to take ownership of them, and we don't want, say for example, the player controller knowing about all 4 of them. So that it's the resource screen's task to say. So Some of this is going to be replaced once all the kind of proper logic gets put in place later on, but this will be, well, I guess resource task 2, 1, 3 and 4, just to give them names, and obviously we need to reference them as just thinking, is this going to work, or would it be better to do it differently? So we need at some point this task to show the hand gathering version. Now we could create a new widget for that, or we could have this task do both, and I think another widget would make the most sense. Definitely, since it's so it's so different to this one, it doesn't need any interaction. So we'll create a new widget. We'll call it resource gathering, and then we'll call that resource mining instead of task. Gathering task. Actually, I think, am I editing the wrong one? No, just getting confused on what's what. So the mining task obviously has all the 3 components, but the non-mining task won't. But it needs to be aligned in a similar way. So to achieve that, we'll just copy the horizontal box from this place and paste it in here. The horizontal box needs to be anchored to the top right with position 5, 0. Round off the width to 64. So we actually don't want an image here for this one because it's a blank space, but we do want a spacer to take its place with 16 width, just so everything's in the same place. We don't want a multiply symbol because again it's not multiplying anything. And again, I closed my screenshot. Find that screenshot again so we know what we're doing. So it just needs a hand and equals. So we don't need the times, but that's another 7 pixels wide. So we need another 7 on this. Make 23. The little man. Again, we don't have a little man, we just have a hand. But we can find that hand. I don't know if I've named the hand, so let's find out if I've done that. So I've called that open pit resource, and the gold bars where they deep mine resource, so I should call that one gathering resource, just so they're consistent. So now I can change that. We don't need the allocated box. We don't actually need the population container or anything. The hand's got a bit weird now. There we go, stretched it. Put him up the top. And we do need the number, and we do need this one, but this one will actually be the resource itself. The text will actually be resource count. Tech level image, actually that doesn't need to be available at all because it never changes. So we just uncheck that one. call it image. So hopefully that will line up fairly well with the other ones. So we can just replace the top one with our gathering resource task. Yep, I think that lines up. So it all fits correctly. There's quite a bit of space between those, and I think it is slightly over 1 pixel over to the right, a bit more than it needs to be. Let me just take it off that, and that should be fine. So that's the one that we gather, and this represents the ones that we're mining in other ways. So task image is fine. Tag lemon image is also fine. That does change. Allocated population. The only one thing we need to change is the remaining time text. Over here we've called it the resource count, so we'll call it the resource count over here too. Now within our resource screen, we just really want to pick 4 resources that we want to display. We'll do it all in the pre-construct. So we're going to from the data table of resources, we get an array of their names. We only want to do 4 resources, so I'm using a for loop instead of a for each. First index will be 0, last index will be wherever we end. But we actually want a random number in range to make sure that we get something within our names. So the first index, no, we want to do that 4 times. It's inclusive, so it's 3. So it's 0 to 3, do it 4 times. And then from that, we want to pick something at random from our array of names. That one. Better context. And that should give us a random resource. Four random resources as it is. So we get 4 random resources. They may be the same. Again, we're not going to worry about that. I just want to kind of get it so that it renders those 4 resources. So for each of those 4 resources, we need to know what type it is, what's its name, all that kind of information. So we want to get to table row that name from that table. It's not. Do we have 2 resources table? So we don't have all the columns. Display name, type, sprite. Actually, yeah, we do. We're just missing it. Display name, type, and sprite. We need to switch on the type of resource. Forgot how to change the names here. Because the case is not going to be 0. Oh, it's defined down here. I was trying to figure out how to change case 0 case 1. I didn't realise it was down there. Start again. That was fine. So for case 1, we only have 3 cases: surface, deep mine or open pit. So if it's one of those 3 things, we want to set the appropriate thing. So if it's this one or this one, we need to create a widget. So we're going to create it rather than use these pre-created ones. There doesn't seem to be any benefit with using these pre-created ones. It might even be more difficult to use them, and we'll see that as we go forward. So we want to create a new widget, and for an open pit or a deep mine we want to create a mining task. For the surface we want to create a gathering task. Once we've created that, we want to add it to our container. Now it's just our vertical box, which we will call our resource container. And in both cases we just want to add that resource. Annoyingly I can't add both at once. I can connect 2 things to it, but I can't add the appropriate things, and I'm going to have to duplicate that. Keep those paths separate for now. Okay, so now if we just delete these 3 and compile it, we can see we get 3. Sorry, we get 4. If we keep compiling it, we can see that the values change. For some reason we only get 3 at one point. There must be some error there. So we can jump over here. We can say row not found. Could not find resource space. So if the road's not found, so if we're being told to do a resource that we can't display, then print out some error. So yeah, there was an error that appeared there. Not sure why there is. So the resources don't change when we open the menu because the menu's already been created by then. That's the kind of advantage or disadvantage with creating it on the root screen straight away. But we can go back to our resource screen in the designer view and just compile it. So we do definitely get some that don't show up. According to this, so it's something to do with the index of the array. Did I do the bounds incorrectly for the resource selection? Yeah, so the length of an array would always return 1 more than what's in it. Random integer and range is inclusive. So if it gives us one too many, that's how we can fix that. So let's see. Now they're not changing at all. Unless we're just really unlucky and we're not getting any gathering ones. So we just print out which resource we're going to show. -1 in the length did not seem to work, because now we seem to only be getting one of the first two. Oh, because I've used min instead of minus. Oops. Min just picked the lowest number of the two, so in that case it was either 1 or 0. Not what we wanted. Okay, so now we're getting a full selection. See if we can find a scenario where it looks like that's stopped them only giving us 3 resources. So that's okay. So that's the fix for that. We don't need that anymore. So what we can do, because we're creating the resource gathering task, if we'd pre-created it, we'd have to call a function on it. But what we can actually do now is expose a variable on the spawn. Now we don't want to expose the image itself, because that means that we've got we'll inevitably have to create the brush, define the sprite, all that kind of stuff. So we actually just want to have the resource name, which is a name, and that needs to be exposed on spawn. Now we could, for simplicity, expose also a variable for the sprite. Disadvantage would be that there's a potential that we could pass the incorrect values in. It could be, we could pass the resource name as the alien, and we could pass the sprite as something completely different. And obviously we wouldn't want to do that. If we don't pass in the sprite, then we have to get the data from the data table again. I'm not sure if there's much overhead in doing that, but we already have it here, so there's also no reason to do that. So just save things until the screen is updated. There we go. So now we've got those values on at this level, and we know that the name of the resource we want is there and the sprite is there. And then in the resource gathering task, on its pre-construct, we can create the brush that we need. Make a brush. That's what we wanted. With that sprite. I think the resources are 16 by 16. And set brush on our image. Tie that up. So now if we go in here, this one, sorry, and we compile, we actually get to see when we're gathering the right sprite. That works with the bones, that works with the wood, so that's great. So far so good. Now we're creating the mining task. Now the mining task actually has a few more properties that we need to fill in, and therefore a few more variables that we need to accept in the construction. It already has a task, so we're just going to rename that to resource name. Could just be called resource, but again we're just going to make sure it's clear, and we'll expose that on construction. We're also going to expose a sprite. What do we call it in this case? I think we called it the resource sprite. Yeah. Finally, we want to know what type it is. And that's going to be a name. So the order in which the variables appear here will affect the order they appear on the constructor. So we want to make sure the order's clean. Now over here we've got those 3 pins. Resource name again comes from over there. The sprite comes from there. We need to save it, compile it to get our resource type, which comes from there. So much like the other one, in this one we're not sorting out the player controller. We will need to. Well, we will need to sort out something because the amount of resources have to come from somewhere. But for now, we'll ignore that so much as we'll just tie things up. So resource sprite, resource image, make sure those are appropriately named. So the resource image is this side now, so we're going to call that the resource image. So that it matches the other one. So resource image, resource sprite, they're all good. We also want to set the type. Again, we're just going to define the types from here. Maybe these should be an enumeration because we're using the different types a few times. But equally we're only going to be using them in these few locations, so we'll have to see. If we start using them more often, then we'll definitely have to make it enum, otherwise we'll just get confused on which one's which, forget to update things like that happen. But for now, if we're the open pit, we want to be setting our, what have we called it, count icon. Is it that one? Now we don't have the images available in here, and the only way I've figured out how to get them kind of cleanly and nicely available is to put them in a function, or put them in a variable. We don't want to define that variable at this level. So we will push all this into a function, and we'll call that set resource method icon image. It needs to come from 2 different places. So we have 2, no, we'll make it 1 map. Actually, this would work a bit cleaner. We don't need to switch then. So that map will be a map of name versus paper sprite with 2 values. Again, you have to define the first. You can't have 2 nons. So it'll be what do they call it? Open pit. Again, if this was an enum, then what do they call it? Wouldn't be a question I'd need to ask. I'd just use the enum values. So open pit, deep mine, call it the method icons. So by having it as a map instead of a switch, I don't actually need 2 set bushes. I do need to make the bush though. And again, it should be 16 by 16. That's probably referencing the wrong one, so we'll just recreate that. Okay. So from here, we don't need to play it, we should just be able to recompile it. It's not quite working. Let's try again. Nope. Where's we going wrong? So we should be setting the resource correctly with the resource sprite. Let's just find out what the resource name is. Doesn't look like it's getting to that point for some reason. Are we showing the wrong one? Okay, it's better from this context. Not perfect. Okay, that's better too. One of them, icon didn't show up for one of them, but that otherwise looks fine. There's a bit of awkwardness with my onion. Maybe I haven't cut the onion out properly, but the icons all work in that view. I'm sure there was a case where it didn't show up properly, depending on the actual resource. I'm quite sure why the resource screen doesn't render correctly. It should. It should be creating the appropriate widget, adding that child to the view box, which we can see because they show up. But the resource mining task, maybe it's just not getting past that. Maybe the cast is failing on a pre-construct. Let's just drop that down to there. Ah, yeah, that was what it was. So you can't deal with the player controller within a pre-construct and expect things to carry on. So there are some cases where the icon doesn't show up properly. Let's keep going until we find it. There we go. So whatever icon that's meant to be, something's gone wrong with its join. But actually, so far as this says, we should have, assuming this is our latest version, should have bone, rock and onion. I guess we don't. Onion and Marmite. And actually what we're seeing is alien and nothing. That one may be the Marmite one. I think I've had problems with that before. So we can check our resources. Yeah, so for some reason that Marmite one says it's got no image. Now, rather than just fixing that, I think that all comes from the data file. So perhaps it's the data file or the sprite that's wrong. So we'll go to our resources, and the Marmite one is the one in the jar. That one there. So Maarmite. Ah, so there's an R in there. That's just Marmite. That's probably where the issue is. So if I go to my resources spreadsheet and just correct that. So just make sure I'm using the right resource as well. Yeah, so according to this resource it should be Marmite instead. Yeah, so there's definitely an inconsistency of what that's supposed to be called. The first time it occurs is in the 4th epoch, according to this sheet, according to the FAQ. So I have to try and dig that out and see if I can find out what it should be, because one resource says that it should be Marmite, and the other one is Mite. So one's Marmite, which I've got, and one's more like Marmite. So for now, we'll just make the spreadsheet the same as the FAQ that I've been following. That's where everything else is from. And then we'll make the resource itself here the same. So it's just no R. Just updating my raw data with that file. And then we can go to the data. Unreal might pop up saying that's changed, but if it doesn't, we can just re-import it here. So now we've got our image back, and we should then be able to just refresh this a few more times. There we go, we can see it there, and we shouldn't get any other issues. But that's pretty much complete in terms of display of the data. We've still got the people to sort out, the allocation, deallocation, etc. But we've at least got the rendering part done. And on that note, we're going to stop now. She'll be back tomorrow evening, sometime after 9, to work on the next bit. So thanks for watching. Hope you come back again soon. Good night for now.